Martin Innes is a criminologist, and back in the late 1990s, when he was just a PhD student, he got very curious about this fundamental thing.
How do crimes get solved? Sounds like a fairly obvious kind of question, and I just thought it was a really kind of interesting set of issues to try and get to grips with.
How do detectives make sense of incomplete information? How do they develop that spidey sense about deception? Are there patterns when people don't tell the truth?
And how do you kind of get all of this information together, present it to a court so that people can have sufficient confidence that they're willing to convict people of very, very serious kind of crimes?
These days, Martin asks those kinds of questions in the digital space. He runs the Crime and Security Research Institute at Cardiff University in Wales. And back in 2011, he set out to develop new tools to help the same kinds of detectives that he'd been observing for so long, to kind of help them supercharge their intuition, to allow them to tap into what was going on with the man on the street without being physically with the man on the street. And he thought he could do that by focusing on social media, which he figured might be filled with clues that could be useful in solving crimes.
We just thought there's lots of information out there that at the time the police weren't really getting access to. And we thought that there must be a use for this.
So he got together with some computer science colleagues and built a tool that, at the time, was pretty revolutionary. They wanted to scrape social media for information that could be used to solve cases, and maybe even glean some insights, and then they'd pass that along to the police. The tool took about 2 years to build. Martin and his colleagues then turned it on in 2013, and it turns out their timing was impeccable, in the worst possible way.
I think it was the next day there was a terrorist attack in London.
Now, early details from eyewitnesses were almost unbelievable. They described how a man was attacked with a machete by two others.
It came to be known as the Lee Rigby attack. The victim was a young soldier returning to barracks, brutally murdered in broad daylight. And you could say that that attack changed everything.
It was there, I think, that we really started to see the seeds of where disinformation, misinformation can start.
I'm Dina Temple-Raston, and this is Click Here, a podcast about all things cyber and intelligence. We tell true stories about the people making and breaking our digital world. And today, we look at new tools that could help us unmask information campaigns with a couple of clicks on a keyboard. And these tools are arriving just in the nick of time, just as adversaries in cyberspace are stirring the pot, and AI may be swooping in to the rescue. Stay with us. The sidewalk where 25-year-old Lee Rigby was murdered became a kind of pilgrimage.
The thousands of floral tributes show better than any words could possibly tell how deeply this community and indeed nation...
Within days of the killing, thousands of bouquets and handwritten notes were piled 3 feet high along 200 yards of fence, all honoring Lee Rigby. Martin was watching all this unfold through a decidedly different lens, a digital lens.
We were just monitoring the data flows and we saw this massive spike in traffic. Went and looked at it and realised we had captured tweets from members of the public at the scene of the crime.
Witness accounts, cell phone video shot by bystanders, even pictures of the killers spread across social media channels like wildfire. And all those posts made the attack not just one of the most graphic ever recorded in Britain, but one in which the public didn't just feel like spectators, they felt like participants.
And we can see in fairly fine-grained detail what happens to public understanding and public reaction. And we'd never been able to do that from crime scene to court.
They floated theories of the crime. They filled gaps the police left by their silence.
One of the things that became apparent was that the initial police communications to the public about these kind of incidents were really lacking. In fact, the police said very little in the aftermath of the killing.
To be sure, even at the best of times, police tend to be pretty closed-mouthed about investigations. They're trained to be that way. Though this is a long-standing tradition, in the digital age, an absence of information becomes dangerous. Extreme ideas fill the void. And that's exactly what happened in the Lee Rigby killing.
Lots of far-right activists kind of came onto social media and were talking about it and almost dominated the conversation, I think.
We have weak leaders, weak police. Our police and our leaders tiptoe around this issue. This issue is political Islam. It's political Islam that's spreading across this country.
Immediately, theories raced across the internet, and Martin began tracking them back to their sources to see how they developed, how they spread, and even how they were debunked. And he says he's learned things in that initial incident that shaped the way he's done this work since.
And I still find myself kind of returning to these core set of problems about how you deal with deception and how do you make sense of it all.
Being unable to make sense of mass quantities of constant information is exactly what adversaries are counting on. During the last presidential election cycle, Russian troll farms created social media personas and started peppering ordinary Americans with disinformation.
The account has been outed by Russian journalists as being a part of Russian propaganda campaigning.
These days, they appear to have tweaked the model. A network of Russian intelligence agents and contracted firms have taken to just hijacking viral conversations. A thread about Taylor Swift's new album suddenly turns to the subject of Ukraine or the benefits of isolationism or long conversations about what's wrong in Europe or the US today. And the people insinuating themselves in these social media conversations are thought to be part of a Russian disinformation group called Doppelgänger.
They are a well-known within the open source analysis community. They're well known as an outfit with links to the Russian state.
And they launched a very high-profile operation recently that caught the world by storm. And Martin says they targeted an unlikely character, Catherine, Princess of Wales. Catherine had gone into the hospital for an unspecified abdominal surgery after Christmas, and Buckingham Palace refused to provide any details about her surgery or her recovery. So, because social media pours an information vacuum, Martin saw a rush to fill it, just like he saw in the Rigby case. But this time, one of the groups doing that was Doppelgänger.
What we could see them doing was they were posting replies and comments to messages about the Princess of Wales's health that had been posted by others. So they weren't
authoring their own original content. They were merely responding to what others were posting. The story was already being framed in terms of a conspiracy, a kind of clearly there's something that the palace isn't telling us kind of way, and Doppelgänger merely seized the opportunity. Though Martin says the group tipped its hand, they would be in the middle of some conversation about Catherine and then they'd change the subject.
They were putting messages up about the war in Ukraine, Russia's elections that had happened recently at the time, or denigrating Ukraine and trying to smear Ukraine.
Okay, so not exactly subtle. And Martin said there were some other tells.
A lot of these messages were in French, which Doppelgänger has had a particular thing about going after the French government. So having kind of seen those behaviours, then we started to look at the accounts that were posting these.
Martin and his team at Cardiff found interesting little patterns, like their account handles started either with the letter A or the letter B.
They were all batch created about the same time, and they had very few followers, and they were surging around particular topics. And all of those are kind of known indicators for Doppelgänger.
They trace these crazy claims about Catherine to 45 social media accounts. And what happened next is out of the traditional Russian playbook. They love to discredit Western institutions and sow chaos. But now they're doing it more efficiently.
They were just jumping on hashtags and conspiracies that were sort of more organically and domestically being produced.
And Martin said that in this case, they were doing it for a very simple reason: money. It turns out even misinformation has to meet performance metrics.
Doppelgänger is run by a commercial organization. They get a contract from the Kremlin to do this kind of thing. And when these kind of situations arise, it's a really, really easy way for them to hit their performance indicators of you should put out at least this many messages on these platforms and they should get this kind of levels of attention and this number of views.
So if you just leap on a hashtag of a trending story, like Catherine's health, it's a really easy way for them to satisfy their contract.
They want to get paid as much as anything else.
And all the craziness only came to an end because of a video, one that Catherine delivered herself.
My medical team therefore advised that I should undergo a course of preventative chemotherapy.
And then, just like that, Doppelgänger faded from the scene. Martin says that Doppelgänger has put a spin on the techniques that groups like the Internet Research Agency used back in 2016 when they were trying to meddle in U.S. elections. Internet research spent a lot of time building up account personas, getting followers so they look like real people. Doppelgänger doesn't seem to be doing that.
They seem to be batch creating disposable throwaway accounts. They're not expected to survive. They don't have a lot of engagement.
In other words, they're aiming for quantity over quality.
And if they get taken down or get burned, then it kind of doesn't matter.
When we come back, more on Doppelgänger's stealthy operations and the effort to strike back. And here's a hint: it involves AI. We'll be right back. There was a time when Russian disinformation campaigns involved dropping leaflets or putting fake messages in a courier bag. But now,
they've got fake websites that look like French newspapers, that look like Fox News, that look like the Washington Post.
This is Barbara McQuaid. She was a U.S. attorney in Michigan and is now a professor at the University of Michigan Law School. She recently wrote a book on disinformation called Attack from Within. And she says the recent Princess Catherine disinformation operation might well have been a big moneymaker for the Doppelgänger network, but it also managed to scratch a couple of other itches too.
Making people less confident in, in the UK, the royal family and the media, suggesting there's some conspiracy afoot.
And there's certainly more nuance to their efforts. For example, one of their campaigns used celebrities and fake ads.
So they use images of, Taylor Swift and Beyonce, the biggest names there are, professional athletes, and put out propaganda that's pro-Russia and anti-Ukraine, like Zelensky is a loser, and the Russian people should prevail, and the Russian government is strong.
They're suggesting that celebrities are taking a stand on issues Russia cares about.
A new and creative spin I haven't seen before. And so I don't know how successful it is, but to the extent these are very influential people, I think if even only a small percentage of those who see them believe that they're genuine, I think it could have a real influence on the outcome.
And if all that sounds far-fetched, just consider what's going on with some Republican members of Congress. They're adopting Russian talking points and reciting them on the House floor.
There are members of Congress today who still incorrectly say that this conflict between Russia and Ukraine is over NATO, which of course it is not.
That's Republican Mike Turner. He chairs the House Intelligence Committee. And this is from a CNN interview he did.
Now, to the extent that this propaganda takes hold, it makes it more difficult for us to really see this as an authoritarian versus democracy battle, which is what it is. President Xi of China.
I don't think anybody would go so far as to accuse any of our members of Congress of deliberately engaging with a hostile foreign adversary. But to the extent their interests are in alignment, we are seeing some things, and I think they are being targeted with this. It's a great example of information warfare. No shots are being fired, but if they can reduce American funding for Ukraine, they can gain the upper hand in their war. So it's a really insidious way of fighting a war.
I've always wondered why I never seem to see this stuff.
Well, it may be that you're misinformed and you just don't know it. What about that?
Maybe I'm not the target audience. I'm not exactly persuadable, and by nature, I ask a lot of questions. Occupational hazard.
I can remember having a conversation with my sister, and one would presume I have a lot in common with my own sister. And she would say things like, did you read the news story about, such and such, something about Obama or something? Like, no, I haven't seen anything like that. That sounds ridiculous. That sounds made up.
And her sister would say, everybody on Facebook is talking about it.
And I think, well, who's everybody on Facebook? Her 5 friends that she's looking at. And so I think because social media allows researchers, to scrape data, they can micro-target us and find messages that are narrowly tailored to our interests. For example, I get all kind of content, Dina, about the 1984 Detroit Tigers. They won the World Series when I was at a formative age, and I love it.
She clicks on these messages, she opens them, she shares them. So, as a result,
I get lots and lots and lots of it. They know me so well. They know me better than I know myself. And so the same is true with other people who are on social media,
including politicians that Russia may be trying to influence.
And so if you are, a right-wing isolationist, chances are you get a lot of this messaging. If you are a Republican member of Congress, chances are you get some of this messaging. So the fact that you are not a right-wing member of Congress means that maybe you are not on the target list.
So we know there's a problem. And lots of smart people are looking for solutions. People like Oren Etzioni, a University of Washington professor and founding chief executive of the Allen Institute for AI.
What we do is detection. You can upload a social media post, and we analyze the media in it, either audio or video or an image, to determine whether it was a deep fake or not.
And Oren helped invent an AI tool that lets regular people figure out if something online is real. It's called True Media. And it just takes a few minutes, and just about anyone can use it. You just have to prove who you are. They don't want to hand it to Doppelgänger members and then have them reverse engineer it. And then all you have to do is upload and review links and quickly determine whether they should be trusted. This isn't theoretical. Since he introduced it in April, more than 10,000 people have signed up. And even in the first few months of 2024, there have been plenty of things to test it on. Fake voice calls from President Biden.
It's important that you save your vote for the November election. Voting this Tuesday.
Fake Taylor Swift audio ads.
Y'all, it's Taylor Swift here. Due to a packaging error, we can't sell 3,000 Le Creuset cookware sets, so I'm giving them away to my loyal fans for free.
Just hours after that terrorist attack on the Moscow concert hall earlier this year, there was an entire fake interview that had a Ukrainian official claiming responsibility for it.
A segment aired on national television in Russia showing the top Ukrainian defense official implicating him in the bombing that happened. We analyzed that and determined that the video was fake, and very quickly it became clear that it was ISIS. So we not only see them using this type of technology, but we can also see the quality of their efforts. And the quality is good, and I fear that the worst is yet to come.
Warren says he has 2 scenarios that keep him up at night. The first one he imagines could unfold just 24 hours before the November election.
You see video of President Biden being rushed to the hospital. You see his doctor getting on national television saying, it doesn't look good. You see the ambulance, you have talking heads commenting on it, and the entire voting process is thrown into disarray by this news.
So that's one disinformation nightmare.
A second nightmare is even later, during Election Day, particularly in, let's say, a polling station that's heavily to one side or the other. People announce that there's an active shooter there, that the polling station has been shut down.
You see videos of people scurrying away, you hear the sound of gunshots and all that, and it's fake.
But AI has gotten so good at generating fakes and lots of different supporting evidence and bots who are promoting and sharing that it looks surprisingly real. That is my nightmare.
And now, thanks Oren, it's our nightmare too. Except true media's tools are designed to detect fakes just like these. And there are more than a dozen other startups that are beginning to offer similar technology. So there's a glimmer of hope. And all of this is coming in the nick of time. Martin Innes, the criminologist turned disinformation specialist, says that we're really in a singular position. What we see unfolding is a perfect storm.
This is going to be a really challenging year. What we're also doing is holding these elections against the backdrop of a very significant war in Ukraine, a significant war in Gaza, and I don't think we've ever really done that before. It really does feel to me like in security terms we've got everything everywhere all at once happening.
And he says being fully aware of the threat is one of the ways we can fight it. This is Click Here. Here are some of the top cyber and intelligence stories of the past week.
The former chief executive of the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange, Binance, was sentenced on Tuesday to 4 months in prison after pleading guilty.
Changpeng Zhao, better known in cryptocurrency circles as CZ, had pleaded guilty to violating the U.S. Bank Secrecy Act, among other charges, late last year. The Bank Secrecy Act requires that financial institutions know their customers. But the Justice Department prosecutor said that Binance, in the interest of growing the platform, turned a blind eye to criminal activity and money laundering practices, going so far as to allow terrorist groups like Hamas and Al-Qaeda to move money using the Binance exchange. The Zhao plea agreement included a record $4.3 billion in fines from the company, and Zhao himself paid $50 million in fines and had faced a lengthy prison sentence. The 4-month sentence was less than observers had expected.
The sentencing guidelines were 12 to 18 months. The prosecution wanted 36 months in total, so 4 months is radically less than what they had hoped for. And the judge.
Meanwhile, the company's head of compliance, former IRS investigator Tigran Gambaryan, is facing separate money laundering charges and tax evasion in Nigeria. Not for anything he did specifically, but because he was an employee of Binance. He's entering his 3rd month of detention and has pleaded not guilty. Also last week, the European Union has launched an investigation into Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram. The EU alleges that the company failed to prevent the spread of election disinformation on its products and didn't identify deepfakes generated by groups like Doppelgänger. The EU says that Meta violated the EU's new Digital Services Act. Meta, for its part, said in a statement it was cooperating with EU authorities. And finally,
joining the committee is Mr. Andrew Whitty, the CEO of United Health Group. You'll hear them.
At a Senate hearing on Wednesday, the CEO of Change Healthcare's parent company, United Health Group, confirmed publicly for the first time that the company paid a hefty ransom to unlock its systems and get stolen patient data back after hackers attacked its networks back in February.
You paid a ransomware, correct, to the hackers?
That's correct.
How much?
$22 million.
CEO Andrew Whitty also revealed at a subsequent hearing that the ransomware attack may end up affecting about 1/3 of Americans. The company is in the process of notifying victims.
Today's episode was produced by Sean Powers, Kat Schucknecht, and me, Jade Abdul-Malik. It was edited by Karen Duffin, fact-checked by Darren Ankrum, and contains original music by Ben Livingston, with some other music from Blue Dot Sessions. Our staff writer is Lucas Riley, and our illustrator is Megan Goff. Click Here is a production of Recorded Future News. Tune in on Friday for Mic Drop, which features our favorite interview of the week, and we'll have a new episode of Click Here on Tuesday. See you then.